Hello guys, I'm Super Ron. Welcome back to the channel. We're back at Auto Shack and this week we're going very agricultural. So this is a car that you haven't seen on the channel before, but I've actually spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on this car in the past. Before we started YouTubing, we had this car come in as a part finished recommission. It came over from Switzerland, hence the left-hand drive, in a part finished state. It had a body off restoration and it was a roller, but nothing worked. It didn't have any brakes, had no fluids, the engine was half together, and we had a boot full of parts with apparently everything to finish it off. Well, as the weeks progressed, we kept finding more and more that we didn't have, but in the end, we got it all together and back on the road. I fitted new brakes, new shocks. I made all the brake lines from scratch on it, which still look perfect today, 5 years later. I made every single one by hand, copied some patterns of some old rusty ones we had to replace, all new brake flexes, put all new bearings in the prop, in the UV joint, finished off installing all the interior, the electrics. In the engine bay, I had to rebuild the carbs and find out what was missing with the airboxes, and we got it all finished and on the road for one of our regular customers. He had bought it as a mid-restoration to finish off, and it did turn out it needed a little bit more than they let on, but ultimately it finished into a great car. Over the years I did many more jobs and upgrades on it as he used it. We got lots of things ticked off, and it came to the time where he wasn't using it very much, so he put it up for sale, and it is bought by a gentleman in London who took it away. But when he wanted to do some upgrades and do some extra work on it, he took the recommendation from the old owner and keeps bringing it back to us from London. The current owner is actually from Portugal, so this makes many trips across the continent. In fact, last time it was here, Lee fitted an overdrive box to the end of the gearbox to give it an extra fifth gear for those long drives. I also fitted a radio and some speakers inside, renewed all the clocks in the middle, added some USB chargers, lots and lots of things just to make this a more usable classic. So even just walking around, as I remember, we had to fit new rear lights, we had the wheels powder coated, we had all new tyres fitted, the electric windows didn't work, so I had to rewire them. Lots of the mirrors were missing screws. Going around, there's lots of different things that was missing, and it's been a long standing project. I have come to love the three-door shape, and it just reminds me of something the Queen would drive. Inside, as I say, it is a left-hand drive, but we fitted all the interior in back then with the rear seats, all the door pads, kick panels, and got everything working inside as well. All the interior lights. One of the other upgrades I did was to fit air horns to it, so when he's in the countryside in Portugal, if there's any moose that pop out, they'll soon get out the way. There's the overdrive box that Lee fitted last time, so you can go on or off. We've got the high and low gears, we've got the diff lock, and the 4-speed transmission. So when they came out in the 70s, this was a game changer for the farmers. They went from maybe going over the fields at 5 miles per hour in the tractor to the capabilities of these being in full luxury. There's loads of room inside, very comfortable suspension. You could now swiftly go over the fields at 30+ miles per hour. I'm sure at the time these were very expensive, so it's quite a status symbol for most as well. And there's no shortage of power. They have the 3.5 litre V8 carbureted engine. So when it came to us, the carbs weren't fitted, the ignition system wasn't fitted. That's all on at the time. There's no air boxes. Oh, another thing I just remember we've done, we fitted a window wash system. So it's got front and rear squirters because none of that was fitted. There's my brake lines. I'll show you the pictures of earlier. Still looking good. Air boxes all on there. The carbs I rebuilt are still absolutely spot on. And this is the smoothest running carb engine I've ever had in the workshop, ever. This is one of the best running engines we've ever had, let alone carbureted. This is cold, turn the ignition on, water temperature, cold. We have not run this today. All it needs is half choke, and I've got every faith. I'm not gonna touch the throttle, ready? Half a turn of the key and it fires up every single time. Stop it, can I even do it again? This thing is so smooth and runs so well. This car is solely the reason I haven't completely disregarded carbs from ever being in a build. I'm not a fan, I'm a fuel injection man, but this speaks for itself. Set up properly, they can be fine. So the other upgrades I remember, we fitted all these new centre gauges and a clock, which any of these Range Rover Classic guys know, that is the most expensive clock in history. There is so much room in these. You've got a driver's seat, you've even got room for another seat in the middle, and then a passenger seat. These things are massive. So in the back, the customer has supplied us with a whole load of parts. So let's have a look at them. You can see the size of these. I'm not exactly wide. 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 6 Super Rons wide. So let's have a look at the bits that the customer has brought along to us. And also while we're at the back, another thing we need to look at, don't know if you can tell, but it is sitting on the wonk. So there's something wrong with the suspension this side, where it's just a saggy spring. Something's not quite right, but as you can see, it is a bit wonky donkey. So the new parts that he's got a load of Range Rover badges that he wants putting on the front and the rear. He's got the ashtray for the middle. He already had the silver bit, we've had that for some time, but he's been tracking down this plastic bit that goes in the middle. We've got some old stock fuel gauge and coolant temperature gauge. Who knows where he found these? I don't think these come up very often. And there's some dates on these new old stock bits. This one, 1994, but the fuel gauge, just see there, 5th of the 7th, 91. So that's been sitting in the box for over 30 years. We've got a new rear wiper switch. We've got some rubbers for the front quarter windows and them as well. We've got a new bonnet lock and we've got some lenses to try on. These ones are slightly different to what's on there. These are the ones that came with the car. But I'm not sure whether these are for a different year or a different model, but they have a black stripe going around them. So he wants to see whether he can fit these to change the look. It looks like this side will go on nicely. The problem is this one, the bolt holes are in different places. So we're not sure whether they're going to fit. It's the right size, but it might have a different backing plate. That'll look a little bit more modern. And then as well, we've had some deliveries. We've got new frames for the quarter windows. And I think in here we've got new bonnet insulation pads to go in. So I'm going to start with the windows, I think. So on these front quarter windows, you can see the rubber at the bottom has completely rotted out. And then in turn, that has rotted all the frame. These do actually open, so they pivot for a bit of airflow. But as you can see, the water's got in, the rubber's deteriorated. So we've got new frames, new rubbers, and new triangles to go in. So they don't look too bad to get out. And then we'll replace these bits here, are these bits here. So hopefully, it shouldn't be too bad to do. Now, there are a couple of rivets at the top on the hinge. But I think, looking at the other one, this should... I think the frame's completely falling apart at the minute. Kind of lucky that these windows didn't fall out. There's not a lot holding it in that frame. So looking at the new one, it's got a threaded bit at the bottom, which is what it pivots on. So there must be a bolt in here somewhere. A cool thing about these doors, because of course it is a 3-door, access people in the back, the front seat does fold forwards, but you wouldn't be able to reach the handle here. So actually have 2 handles on these, one for the back person, so you can get out nice and easy. That's the top half off, but there's no hole. I think let's go from the bottom and go all the way up. So upon a little research, it looks like this whole frame has to come out and then you can access that bolt. So there's a couple of bolts on the ends, one in there. So I've taken all them out and then there's just 2 at the bottom, one that goes through there and then you can lift that all the way up. And on this end, there should be one, but someone decided not to put a bolt in. They've decided to weld it on instead, which means this won't be able to slide up if it's still attached to its bracket. So thanks for that. We're gonna have to cut that off and then the frame should slide out the top and we can get access to that nut on the bottom of this pivot. All right, moved on to this side because the bolts are all okay here. So, there we go. And there is our little bolt. Looks like it's spring loaded. Tension pulling that down. So we'll undo that and then we can do all our swapping over. feel hopeful. I think that's had a bit of water in there. Yep. Snapped off, but doesn't matter because we've got a new one. Now, if I open the window, that should... And it's out. Now we need to get this glass out of this rubber and get this rubber out as well because we've got a new one of these. So that's the new rubbers all in. They fit nice and snug in there and look much nicer than the rotten ones. So they're good. Got the glass in the new frames. So we'll stick them in, put our lightweight, heavyweight spring on the bottom of it. And that's what holds it down. Looks a bit overkill. Hopefully they'll slot in, click on that hinge, and then we can slide it back down into the door. And there's both sides all back together. Looking a lot nicer in there than that rusty mess that was there before. Got the door cards and everything back on. That's looking good. So I've got the dash dropped down, you can just see there. Got the new rear wiper switch in, the old worn one. And got the ashtray in the middle. So that's in its factory place. And got the clocks out because we had to fit that new coolant gauge and fuel gauge. So got that in. Something I've always found strange on this, it's always really hard to get to the bottom of the clocks to get inside it. And I always saw that it was full of fiberglass in there. We have had to repair and paint this before, but there was no way of getting to the gauges in there. Nothing clipped off, it was all one piece. So I had to cut it open. And what it turned out, for some reason, in its lifetime, someone had fiberglassed all this together. So luckily it came off, clipped off, and then I could get to the gauges. So they're the new gauges in there, but we weren't sure what to do with this because it had all been just smoothed in, fiberglassed in, then kind of painted together. But when we had to order some bits from Famous 4, it turns out these are still available. So this is what it should be like. It should be 2 plastic pieces with a join that goes across the top, like that, which we've never had. That's always been smoothed on this one, which I always thought was strange. And this is why. So new gauges are in. We can transfer the glass over to this one, put the new front on. Our new rear springs have turned up, along with all the plates for the bottom, new catch. These are the clips for the bonnet pad brackets, and a new oil temperature sender because the gauge was being a bit weird. And we've also got a new bonnet pull as well. I'll show you that in a minute. But now we've got the new gauges in, I can put the glass into these ones. Screws in the back, put it all together, and there it is together. I cleaned all the glass up and that is looking fresh. They look like brand new clocks now. And the other thing that was always a problem with these is to get to the back when all this was one piece all smoothed together. You obviously couldn't separate it all. Had to try and reach up through this hole here, which is under the dash. You had a little pincher to take out the plug, and the speedo drive this side you had to get just your fingertips under the dash. But now it's all together and 2-piece. You bolt it all in, plug it in, and this bit, it's got these little cutouts here, and they go into those little spring clips at the bottom. Well done, Land Rover. I'd always moaned at you for not being able to get to all the plugs and it being so difficult. Turns out, wasn't your fault. So now with all the new gauges in, new covers, we can put this back in the car. So you had to reach up before. I had to just get my fingertips up through here just to be able to unclip that. But now when we put it in, we can get to the back and plug it in much easier. So we'll get that bit done. And click, in it is. Give it a test. There goes the fuel gauge. And all back together. Got the little under tray on, all the stereo back in, and the clocks are in, looking good. The other thing the owner's been doing is getting all the original gear knobs, all the correct ones. Even for the overdrive, this just had a yellow one on it when we done the overdrive conversion. But the other thing that he got for us to fit is the bonnet cable, because the one that was on it, the bonnet pull, had been painted green when the car had its respray. That must have been left in. So he got us an original bonnet lock one with the writing on it, but this is pretty frayed and bent, and it's not going through the outer, and all the outer is bent and crimped, and so these weren't going through, and also the end was broken inside as well. So luckily, Famous 4 still do the original new old stock bonnet pull with the outer cable and everything, so we can get that on. I've got the grill off, so we can attach that up there. And also part of the lock was broken, but you can also get all the new lock and the fittings, and this one is for a left-hand drive. I don't know what the difference is, but they had it in stock and installed. Perfect. The other reason why we fit a new catch underneath, because these don't actually have a secondary bonnet catch, and this one was looking a little bit worn, and it's not a chance you want to take, because usually if a bonnet pops up it gets caught on the secondary, but on these ones it will just carry on going up and up. So now it's got a new cable, new catch, working nicely. We can get this bonnet pad in. So it's a bit of a contraption. We've got these stainless steel rods, and we've just got in the clips for them, and that is for this brand new pad, which goes in the middle here. So these rods apparently go where these lines are here. That one looks good for there. So I reckon them ones go at the top, and the ones with an arm go somewhere down here. That's the bonnet pad all on with the new stainless bars holding it up. It looks a lot neater. I don't know how much noise insulation that will give, but definitely looks better. So all that's left now is these rear springs. Let's try sneaking these out. There we go. And in. And number 2 in, all with new perches. Let's get it back down on the floor. Well, I've just spotted while that side was lower, there is quite a height difference between the springs. So one has definitely sagged down, as you can see there. So that's why one corner was sitting a lot lower. And this tool here is an absolute game changer. You saw how easy it was to change those in situ. It made this job super easy. Right, let's give this one last test drive. Oh, on the button every time. Right, let's take this for a little test drive. I've just had to put the GoPro on super view to fit it all in because the cabin's so wide, I wasn't hardly in the frame. So from what I remember, this is a very agricultural driving experience. The gears are very short, the gearbox is sitting right below you, so it's very noisy. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're only at 40 kilometers per hour and we're in 4th gear already, and it just used the V8 power to go all the way through. Which is why the owner had us fit this overdrive box, just to bring those revs down when you are on the dual carriageway. Being so floaty, it is quite vague steering, you just kind of guide it down the road, but it is definitely comfortable. You can't feel any of the bumps. You just kind of waft along in the general direction of the road. Being a left-hand drive, it does make it a bit more of a challenge driving on these country roads. But with the size of it, people do tend to get out of your way. So we're going along in 4th, we've got the gear stick here, and then we go into overdrive, and that is our 5th. It's quite a contraption, it's like driving a tank with all these levers everywhere. And back then, compared to what else was on the road, this must have been the pinnacle of luxury. Back into fourth. And then we've got all our other gears as well. So everything's looking good. Water temperature is now coming up to about a third, which is perfect because we're going along. Oil temperature is down at about a quarter, which even on a hot day, that's pretty good. So I think we can take this back, do the final little checks, and then we can call it done. Right, that is everything on our list ticked off. So the owner can now take this back to Portugal and enjoy it in the sunshine. So there's another few hours added to my tally on this car. And I have got to know these inside out now. I've nearly got the wiring diagrams memorised off by heart, so repairs were getting more and more simple. All the gauges are working fine. All the new clocks and surround look so much nicer when you look at them driving. It sits level now, we've got the new springs on the back as well. So I think we can wrap up this episode. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this Range Rover Classic. It's not something you see every day anymore. And by today's standards, you can use the term luxury a little bit loosely on this. But 50 years ago, this must have been insane. Able to go off-road in full comfort with all the mod cons of the time at your fingertips as well. What a status symbol this must have been. So make sure you give this video a like. Be sure to tune in because as you've seen round the workshop, we've got many other cars here that I'm sure will interest you too. And we can put the Red Bull collection in the recycling bin. But until next time, make sure you have fun.